So welcome you all to Los Angeles in this day-and-a-half event. Let's do this, and I would like to introduce our welcoming speaker, Ted Bardacke, LA Director of Infrastructure. I see Ted's card here. Where's Ted hiding? Come on up, Ted. Ted currently holds the position of Director of Infrastructure for Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti and Adjunct Professor of Urban Environmental Design and Planning at UCLA, and was instrumental, in crafting the city's first ever sustainability plan for his previous role as Deputy Director of Mayor Garcetti's Office of Sustainability. I'll let you say the rest, but thank you for being here and welcoming our group too.
I've got one right here. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Just quickly, on behalf of Mayor Eric Garcetti, I really welcome you all to Los Angeles. For those who are from out of town and for those who are from LA, thank you for being good hosts, particularly Chris Espinoza, who's the head of El Pueblo. Thank you for being a good steward of this building, this area, those lovely trees right outside. We've replaced some sidewalks around here recently that also involved some tree removals, and Chris was very instrumental in making sure that what we replaced was also going to be here for the next 50, 70, 100 years, just like this whole Pueblo. So thanks, Chris, for being a wonderful steward of our urban environment. In the mayor's sort of vision of Los Angeles, we are making rapid investments in infrastructure. Some of his thought is sort of guided by an early mentor of his who Eric interned with as a high school student, Andy Lipkiss over there. So Andy, thank you also for being a good steward and a guide over the past several decades. In my role as Director of Infrastructure, I look at electricity, all three parts of the water cycle. That's potable water, wastewater, rainwater, sidewalks, urban forestry, streets, municipal building design, design standards, contract administration. It goes on and on. So sometimes people say that crumbling is my middle name. And I wear that very like a badge of honor. But I'm not really here to talk to you about trees and urban forestry because, the amount that you all know about this and will interchange in like an hour over here is going to far exceed anything that I will ever learn in a lifetime. But I do want to share with you some thoughts about infrastructure here in Los Angeles and in urban areas in general, about sort of some directions things are going, with the hope and thought that you all might take some of that and think about where trees and the urban forest fits in to some of those trends, particularly in a place like LA, which is making massive investments in its electricity system, its water system, its transportation system, and in transportation, we're talking about both public transportation as well as roads and sidewalks. And to think over this next day about sort of where you all fit and how the urban forest sort of evolves with that. Becomes an it maintains and becomes an already integral part of that infrastructure. So the real trend we see these days is a move away from centralized infrastructure into a distributed system. There are many reasons for that, but you can see it across sectors. You could see it in the electricity sector, in the transportation sector, in the water sector. Sort of the change is rapid, and sometimes it's sort of hard to step back and understand what's going on. But some of the drivers of that are clearly sort of sustainability, understanding that a lot of small-scale interventions may be more, sort of a quicker path to deal with some of the big issues, particularly climate change and drought. It's driven also by this thought of resiliency, and that if we think about sort of distributive webs and networks of anything, but of infrastructure, of ecosystems, those are more resilient by definition than single monoculture, linear paths. And that guides a lot of the thinking around infrastructure development today. It's also guided quite a bit by choice and the desire of individuals and communities to have more control, more interaction, more sort of a more dynamic relationship with the urban environment that that isn't just sort of one path. If you think about, how many people who arrived here today actually did more than one mode of transportation, right? You arrived probably 3 modes, sometimes 4. Even people who left their house and drove their car and arrived here and parked, walked twice. And sort of the number of options that people are wanting in order to sort of be co-managers, and this is something that Andy has talked about, how we are all beginning to be managers of the urban infrastructure, not just users. And so I think about that a lot in terms of particular among younger generation and folks who expect to have choice and expect to have some sort of customization of their urban environment and how they interact with it. I think increasingly as through climate change and drought, we are also beginning to sort of have some more visceral feeling about our environment because of extremes. And some of this sort of links into biophilia, which is sort of the inherent sort of love and desire to interact with nature. And that becoming particularly acute in the urban environment where there can be a deficit of it, but also the environment around us is beginning to send us signals. And I think those are signals that are neurological, that we pick up in a lot of different ways, and that we who, and you all who work in urban forestry certainly know and are stewards of an important part of that desire to interact with nature on a sort of a daily basis. Couple of examples of this here in Los Angeles in the electricity sector. What we see is a lot of people investing sort of in solar and battery storage and stuff in their homes, and that is going to begin to mushroom out to the neighborhood scale. This distributed energy infrastructure is very much starting to boom. I generate electricity on my house with the solar, and I plug in the electric car, and I have a new dynamic interaction with my utility because of that. That's one sort of example. And I have to trim my tree in the backyard to make sure it doesn't shade the solar panels too much. And so I also have a new sort of respect for how quickly that tree is growing and how much it provides, and how I need to sort of manage that tree so that I can do these other important things for the environment. Again, in the transportation sector, it's about now creating multiple pathways, and particularly those of you who work in urban forestry know that one of those key pathways is sidewalks. And we don't really have, from my perspective, a walkable sidewalk unless we have shade. And trees are the best way to to provide that. And so to really say that's a real choice, that walking is a real choice, we need to also think about what kind of walk that is. You know, people, the research says that people will sort of tend to walk 5 minutes to the bus or 10 minutes to the train, but they'll double that amount of time if the walk is interesting and comfortable. And there's stuff to see and feel as you walk. And then, of course, in water, I know I'm going to let Andy talk a little bit about distributed water infrastructure and us being the co-managers of that. But trees are clearly a really important component of that distributed infrastructure because of all of the roles they play in infiltration, in soil regeneration, in sort of making that place. The final thing that I want to sort of have you all think about, and I think about a lot when I'm thinking about trees, is, you know, in some sense, trees are perhaps the original distributed infrastructure, right? They are both singular entities that are beautiful and provide value on their own, but as a system, as an urban forest, as an integrated pieces, as a web, their value multiplies. And I think that in some sense, you know, this is the way infrastructure is going, but let's not forget that there is an infrastructure in place that already is doing that for our cities, and that we need to sort of build on that, not just sort of see them as an enhancer, but as a base. So as you go through the conference today and tomorrow, really be thinking in this way about how to build on those things, how to build on the urban forest we have, how to interact with these trends that we see, and how to create lovable, beautiful, sustainable, resilient life in our cities. Thank you very much.